stuff while I'm getting it up because I completely forgot. I have to wait for the program to open. Maybe you should stop the recording just for a moment.
There was.
Okay.
Yep, I could do it.
Okay, so who would like to read the credo today? Any volunteers?
I guess I can. I haven't done it yet. The Pelham Credo, Ground Rules for the Peter Fleming Forum. The ground rules in the Pelham Credo are designed to support a safe, nourishing environment. We ask that you come to the meeting with a head free of the influence of drink and drugs. 2, in any Pelham setting, you keep control of the pace and depth of your sharing. You may pass or say no to any suggestion. Your no will be accepted and not judged or analyzed. No means no. 3, even though the meetings are recorded, we ask that people respect the confidentiality of those present and do not share anything they heard outside the meeting. 4, in Pelham work, we have a strict no gossip rule. No gossip means we do not talk about anyone who is not present, even in a pleasant way.
Okay. We start with our statements about our name and our location. I'm Peter and I'm in Norfolk in England. Mary?
I'm Mary Gellerman, and I'm in Rosarito Beach, Mexico.
Okay, Vic?
Hi, I'm Vic Flagg. I'm in Abbotsford, British Columbia, Canada, about an hour out of Vancouver, and thrilled to be here again. Thank you very much.
Okay. Elizabeth?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm from Eugene, Oregon.
Okay. Victoria?
Hi, I'm Victoria. I'm from Jardin de Luxembourg in Paris, France. First day all the gardens and parks in Paris are opened.
Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm from Eastbourne on the south coast of England.
Okay. Stacey?
I'm Stacy, and I've decided the wizard's name is Christopher because he's holding a crystal ball, and that's the wizard. And I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay. Cynthia?
I'm Cynthia, and I'm here in Kankakee, Illinois, which is a little south of Chicago.
Okay. Thank you. To go straight into it, I'm pulling together or connecting two parts of the work today. This is, and they are the 7 levels of listening and the part of the work that's called the persona gap. The 7 levels of listening takes us from the openness and letting go of control, which is passive listening, to a form of meditation, all the way through to making judgments about what's good and what's ill in the world, which is the 7th level of listening called evaluation. There's a lot in there. A lot of, as I said when I first presented this material, a lot of our values are in the levels of listening. And I guess particularly the first 3 levels of listening, where we're not evaluating, not interpreting, not analyzing at all. We're just letting in what someone's saying. Passive listening, just to remind you, is a form of meditation. It's letting in what someone says as if we're an empty vessel. as if we're just open to what someone's saying to us, whether it's about themselves or about us. We're just open to it. And the next one, which we call content, is about a more concentrated level of listening, and it's just letting in what someone's saying, noticing and perhaps even highlighting that which we might regard as important, but again, it's not analyzing it at all. The third level of listening is called the obvious, and again, that's letting in what's being said to us, and noticing the patterns. The obvious is like an overview. Someone's always asking questions, or someone never asks questions. Someone always got a negative take on things. Someone's always got a positive take on things. Someone talks about their kids a lot. Someone never talks about their kids. That's what the obvious is. But the obvious is taking that in, the magic of it, and there is magic in those first three levels of listening, because whether it's on a personal level, a political level, or a professional level, those first three levels of listening will absolutely give us accuracy. Because to put it technically, we are taking in phenomena before we are doing anything about it. That's the power of it. And then the other levels of listening are voice, which is the message we get from someone's voice, and particularly the message we get when someone's voice changes, okay? You know, you're hearing someone talking, how bad things are, and they're pretty bad, and picking up the very bad bits that are going around. And then they start talking about something else. They talk about, they took their paint box and, you know, went out into a field and painted a picture. Or they're talking about a grandchild. And the voice is different. The flip side of that is also true. Someone's talking about the painting they're doing or talking about their grandkids, and all of a sudden something else comes in. Perhaps a fear of what's happening in the world. Maybe a fear of what's happening in their city, you know, tonight. Or their child is in that city tonight. And you feel the different voice, or all of a sudden the sunniness that was in the conversation has got this quality. And when you learn to listen to voice, you can pick up, okay, are they just making a statement about the world, which we can all do, or are they making a statement about them in a particular significant way? That's the sort of thing voice gives you. And those four levels of listening provide a great deal of accuracy if we can learn about them and practice with them. Because one thing I say about my work in Pelham a lot, it's practical or it's nothing. And the practicality of passive listening, even if that's just, you know, if you practice at a bunch and, you know, learn it, practice it, learn it, you almost have a switch that, okay, I'll turn that switch, you know, I'll passive listening for a while. It might be 2 or 3 minutes, might be 5, might be 10. Passive listening is not something we say people should do all the time. It's powerful when we do it because it tunes up our listening. And the others, our emotional reaction, which can cloud our thinking and our listening. Goodwill, and there we get into the hard part of this. You know, we are making a judgment whether someone's to be trusted about what they're saying, whether someone's willing to consider change, whether someone's willing to consider an opinion that's different than theirs. They're all the things that exist in goodwill. And then we get the seventh level of listening, which is evaluation. And in evaluation, we are making judgments. We are making judgments, diagnosis, and assessments. And in Pelham, we don't run away from that. You know, we don't run away from the fact there's evil in the world. We don't run away from the fact that at times there's stunningly goodness in the world. The field of psychotherapy and counseling, which is the home base of my work, in terms of how we make our living, to put it simply, can at times be unwilling to go into issues of evil in the world. You know, there's something, we don't do that. We call it there. And to link this in, so the levels of listening are hard. No, it's hard work. And it's just to take one example, if someone's engaged or I'm engaged in a row with a friend, a row with a partner, or an argument with someone about politics, and I'm really invested in it, you know, and that's my emotional reaction, which is the fifth level, and my evaluation, which is the seventh level, in terms of levels of listening. Can I go back up? And can I just passive listen to what this other person's saying to me? And we can, it's very demanding, but we can reach a point where we can say, yeah, I can't do that. I'm not willing to passive listen here. And that means something about our goodwill. It means something about our ability to be at our best. Because I guess in a simple way, what the work's about is that being at our best so we can make those contributions that are most useful to those around us and most healing to ourselves. And that's what it comes down to. I lived for many, many years in South London, and my younger son and his family still live there. And I like it at times, like London accent, which is way better. And I feel a lot of what Pelham's about is trying to make the world way better. Just to bring that in and link it to the other topic, which is in some ways the hardest part of this work. I always claim that it's the reason, including people here today, two Marys, to coin a phrase, you know, it's the reason Pelham's, or it turns out, very good practitioners in the field. And we do a lot with that which is understanding ourselves through other people's perceptions. I call it the persona gap. The persona gap is the difference between my perception of myself and your perception of me. It's stated that way. It's really simple, straightforward. Within that difference, within the persona gap, those issues which we most need to look at and most need to address are almost always located. You know, someone says, well, you know, I perceive you as someone who is maybe not as confident as he could be and interrupts people a lot at times. I mean, just those two issues can take me into deep stuff for me. So there is the what we now call the persona gap. People who trained with me a long time ago knew as the self-identity feedback exercise or a self-identity exercise. And this part of the work is based on what I regard as one of David Pellin's stunning points of originality. He had this concept he called self-identity. And what self-identity is the part of you that you can't know yourself and you can only know through the perceptions of other people. I've come up with, yeah, this is one of them, and the words performance carrier material is the main other one, where me changing David's words and coming up with different ways to make it more understandable was out of anger, okay? You know, people who wanted to dismiss the work, and I was really, I remember particularly where persona gap came from. There was a young woman who was helping me run the training courses in Italy. She was Chinese, she was quite slight. She was really, really good at the work. So she was running a group, and there was another person there who was really a rather nasty, elitist sort of person. And she wouldn't listen to this other person who was running the group, because she didn't feel she rated, and she wouldn't accept this stuff about self-identity because that's obscure and I don't understand it and what does it mean, blah, blah, blah. And I was just so angry that somehow it just popped into my mind. Okay, I'll call it the persona gap. I'll define it this way. Now, you know, come on with your criticisms of David Pellin, okay? And it works. It's a very simple concept. It's very powerful. It has some of the, and the way it relates to the listening side, and I want to stay with this session and next session. Last time was, you know, going over passive listening again. If we didn't have the listening material we have, we couldn't use the persona gap the way we use it, because, to be frank, it's a bit too stark. It really pins us all to the wall, okay? And the way we use it, as Mary's referred to you to the parts in the manual, but, you know, we use this in a group setting and it's structured in a particular way. You know, we all take a turn giving and receiving. And that is a place also where those of us who were leading the staff are just there on the same level as anybody else, okay? And it has a particular power. You know, I think within that exercise, we receive stuff that can stay with us for a very, very long time. Very long time. I remember there was a man, he died relatively recently. And he, Martin, and he met Trish in Pelham a long, long time ago. And they were together 37 years. And Martin, he would never have come to Pelham. He was Chicago-based, actually, ski bum drug dealer. And he was running his brother's good humor truck. And some black kids came up and said, well, give us ice cream. And they didn't want to pay. And he stood up to them, and one of them pulled out a gun and shot him through the neck. And he was paralyzed from the waist down. And he and Trish were together 37 years after that. Martin refused to prosecute. But anyway, because of his accident, he had a very squeaky voice, okay? And the feedback he gave me, and I guess I like telling the story in length because the feedback was so important. And, you know, people gave feedback and it was like 3 minutes or 5 minutes, you know, it was quite long and it involved a lot of stuff and we were careful about what we said to each other, you know, it was a particular sort of structure that worked. And Martin just looked at, there were a lot of people there. Martin just looked at me across the room and said, Peter, you really got too much going for yourself to take so many goddamn cheap shots. And that was all he said. And well, I can tell it now. You know, I can get in an argument and be very, very clever. Very clever, very defensive, quite nasty. And he picked up on that. And well, that literally is well more than 40 years ago now. Yeah. 40 years ago now. Martin died 3 years ago. After having survived, you know, wheelchair, double amputee, all of that. So the persona gap there was, you know, I perceived myself as this intense, caring, therapeutic guy. And he was saying, well, you know, other people see you as taking cheap shots and using the position you got to take cheap shots. I mean, that's the persona gap. And the passive listening part is so crucial because we train people in listening, we can use feedback, which is and we can learn about our persona gap. The persona gap is knowing ourselves at a certain depth that whether we're a teenager or an old guy or something in the middle, knowing ourselves at a depth in which we sit comfortably with, you know, our weaknesses, our unattractivenesses, whatever they are, you know, whatever the negative bits are, we can face them. In my work these days, and particularly working with professionals in the field, I say, you know, we got to be prepared to look in the mirror before we glance out the window and walk out the door. And in my field of work, often the hardest thing for people to do is look in the mirror. I mean, I can analyze you, I can evaluate you, I can diagnose you, I can, with accuracy and panache, look at how you are in our therapeutic relationship. Am I looking at how I am in our therapeutic relationship? And we don't necessarily have a long history of that. And of course, if we won't look in the mirror in terms of this field of work, we can't, we lose touch with our caring life force. I can only be at my best for you if in some ways I understand and face me. And that, yeah. So what we're doing here is bringing those two things together. The payoff for the levels of listening is we can handle our own persona gap. And we can do the passive listening and the obvious and those things. But we can also reach a level where we can understand ourselves deeply, which is the seventh level of listening. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to give a sketch of how my ability to learn about my persona gap changed. And incidentally, I was there when Trish and Martin met. Don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
I was there that first summer. But, you know, when I was young and I didn't have any awareness of the persona gap between me thinking I was really charming and delightful when I was full of life and very compulsive high pendulum swings, and other people finding me overwhelming and calling me a bulldozer and just like way too much. When people would give me feedback about that, I either denied it or was very hurt. And as I gradually learned how to passive listen better, I was able to be less defensive and self-justifying. And I was terrible. I was terrible when I was young. I wouldn't listen to anything. Something slipped in and really helped me. But what I just wanted to say was, now, you know, one of the things is I can come across as snobbish. I still don't really understand or patronizing. I still don't really understand how much it's genuinely part of me, or how much it's like, I don't really understand it in depth, but what I do know is that I now welcome knowing if I've come across as snobbish or patronizing. That's such a huge sea change from, I can't bear that you're saying this to me, you know, to, oh, really? I wonder, you know, then I self-reflect. I wonder, you know, I just self-reflect on this feedback. I don't get excited, anxious, defensive, mostly, you know, passive listening is, you don't do it perfectly every time, but mostly I have set myself to intellectually decide to welcome uncomfortable feedback about the persona gap. And of course, it accelerates the rate of change and depth of self-knowledge when you can say, oh, okay, I didn't know I was like that. That's all.
Do you want to say anything, Elizabeth?
Hi. I don't have anything to say at this time. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, Vic?
Hi. This is difficult for me. This is overwhelming to me. It really is. I just, and I want you to know, I really would welcome the feedback. Say, Vic, you've said enough, shut up, you know, because I am overwhelmed and profoundly touched by everything that I'm hearing. Everything that Peter just said, everything that Mary just said has touched me very, very, very deeply. And I've already shared this a bit with Mary in our email conversation, but for basically, half a century, I've carried around the memories of being in the activator unit and having this remarkable man give me an injection of life energy. And over that half a century, the times when I've tried to share a bit of that, and I have not had a career path like many of you have had, but when I've tried to share a bit of that, including even sharing my essay, I've got, big deal, so what, you know, and it's been a profound shock to me. I mean, it's a profound shock to me. And now it's a profound shock to me, using the word in a positive way, to be here talking with you people, listening to you. I'm really overwhelmed, and again, I could get very emotional here. So again, please don't hesitate to tell me you've said enough for now, Vic, because this is really overwhelming to me. I'm going to use some code words. Previously, in one of the sessions, I identified someone that I can't identify, and that was edited out, and I appreciate that. So the code words I'm going to use is someone that I'm working with that I care a great deal about, and I've known for a long time. And when I got to tell you this, 50 years ago, I sat in the activator unit and I heard David Pellin warn us about marijuana. And I heard him say that the United Nations study said that the THC in marijuana produces instant insanity in rats. And 50 years and 6 months, and a year ago, when I smoked my first joint from a so-called friend in the forest, the immediate high, 3 months later, I had best friends dead of heroin overdoses. And so when anybody says to me it's not a gateway drug, it's, talk about, Peter, you mentioned anger, you know, and the anger that I feel is so great, you know, and I listened to what you said so much. I can be sitting in the couch here downstairs, and then I start thinking about this, and I'll walk over to the window and I'll say to myself, shit, you want to fight with me? You want to put that at me now after 50 years? You want that with me? You don't know what you're asking for. Because the anger that I feel, having seen this at close range and what's going on in our society on this front, is appalling, you know. So everything that you've said, and you talk about the persona gap, and I look at myself, and the many times that in a strong way you can feel the strength that can come from a negative energy as well as a positive energy, right? And I look at myself and how I've talked with my kids and my former wife in my marriage, and how I was dominating, and I see that. And one of the reasons I was like that was because I came from a place of hell. And that was the only way that I could kind of, you know, control whatever, you know. I don't know if that makes sense, but when I listen to what you've said, both Peter and Mary especially, and I think there's a lot in there for me to unpack. And through the skills of listening, which could make available the contribution that I could make from self-knowledge. Without the skills of listening, I can't develop the contribution from her, and I presume that's the same with all of us, right? And so this connects with Pellin's. Sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Just a couple of things about that, but practically, yeah, passive listening will change your life. You know, I'm saying that very seriously. Taking a risk and saying it very seriously to you particularly, because it'll give you control and discipline around that energy, which, to be quite frank, you gotta contribute from, otherwise it'll drive you bonkers. And passive listening will give you that. You know, we can give you that. A couple of other things, just that you well, you carried the torch and no one would listen. And I carried the torch and got lucky, and they did. But, you know, I want to acknowledge that, and also acknowledge, because, you know, I think my stuff about persona gap is really powerful. You can take it anywhere. You know, politicians, you know, church leaders, a staff meeting at work, within a family that's functioning, within a family that's not functioning. And if you take the persona gap and also the levels of listening and do the bit I talk about basic metaphor being a nourishing family. It's what a nourishing family does. You know, hey, Mum, you're not really listening to what Billy's saying. You know, it'll happen. But there's no persona gap without David's brilliant concept of self-identity, that we can't know ourselves the way we think we can, and there's a whole part of us that can only know ourselves through how others see in us. That was just stunningly original. As you know, with probably 15 minutes in a 10-minute lecture, okay? A whole lot of this stuff was really short. But the other thing, and I was interested you brought that up, because at that time, Vancouver in the 60s was the same, was San Francisco in the 60s. And, when marijuana and LSD came in terms of, young social workers and students and psychology students, to use one particular tragic example. I mean, this stuff came in to Vancouver, and my boss, everybody, it's really good. It's going to be a lot worse than booze, and we know the damage booze does. And everyone was into it. It's sort of age of Aquarius, I can't remember it all. It was that time, summer of love, all of it. And LSD was very dramatic, but, marijuana was just great and safe and not like booze. One person, only one person I heard say, no, this will change your brain. And that was Dave. He was the only person who said, absolutely, this is a bad idea. And it would, it swept through the university and in popularity. And I can't remember, he's Professor Nagley. He was world famous sort of sociologist at the University of British Columbia, had a big following, took LSD, had a breakdown, and walked through the glass window in a 10 stories up in Vancouver General Hospital and died. And it was interesting and I noticed at the time, well, maybe Dave's wrong about this, right? And he was spot on. Yeah.
Just a really quick comment.
Hold a minute, Stacy. Yeah.
Apologies.
You got it? Okay? No.
Sometimes when I've muted someone, I've noticed this in other meetings, there's a little difficulty with the person unmuting. I don't know how easy it is to...
We'll get there.
Perhaps you should move to somebody else for now. I don't know.
Do you want to, Cynthia, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, there's well, I don't know. There's a lot here. I do know one of the things about the persona. Oh dear, you know what? Actually, this isn't a good time. Can you call me later? There's some noises downstairs and that I don't want to come on here.
Yeah, Elizabeth?
Hi. So I was thinking to myself this morning before I logged on, what a heck of a time to be talking about listening. The night before last, there was a riot in my city. And one of my friends lives basically a block away from where it changed from a protest to a riot. And I swear this is related. She put up a video of what she saw. And by the time it had circled around to where she was, the police had sort of barricaded off the street and were ordering the crowd to disperse. And I noticed something in the message of the voice that I had never heard in a police officer in my life. And that was audible fear. I swear that they practiced the voice, you know, the one. Excuse me, ma'am. But I heard this audible fear and it shocked me. And the next thought I had was that one of the most dangerous things a person could do at that point would be to acknowledge that fear openly to the police officer. And I don't know, it just got me thinking about how people in these institutions are sort of required to think about themselves versus who they are as human beings. And I don't know, it's just been on my mind a lot lately.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up. And, you know, some of ambition about this work is that it transcends counseling and psychotherapy. It's got broader implications. And one of the things that David Pellin gave to me was almost the freedom to not be narrowed into a particular professional stream, but, you know, he called it a philosophy. So, okay, I call it contribution training with philosophical implications. Because I'm not going to let them get away with ridiculing him. And I haven't. But it's got those applications in terms of persona gap. You know, not just how is your perception of yourself different from other people's perceptions of you. I mean, you can take it, a nation, how is our nation's perception of ourselves compared with other nations' perceptions of us? I mean, that brings up very profound issues, very profound issues. And being able to bring in the discipline and the practicality of 7 levels of listening, you know, can we use level 1, passive listening, level 2, content, level 3, the obvious, to listen to our opponents. You know, can we do that? And that's a challenge. But you get examples of people who do it. And I had a funny sort of conflict with a colleague of mine because I wrote something called the Pelham Workbook, it's a general workbook, and there's quite a bit about passive listening, and I used Barack as an example of, and a picture of Barack sitting in his chair as an example of passive listening. Because I, you know, I've never having heard of me or Pelham or, you know, this guy knows the levels of listening. Okay, he certainly knows passive listening, and it's there. You know, it's there in the nickname. You know, no drama Obama. In a sense, there's no drama in passive listening. There's okay, I'll listen to what you're saying to me. And the application and the challenge of this material on that level couldn't really work. And my feeling is it's the great ones know this stuff on another level. And, you know, certainly, you know, Dr. King's ability to listen, and where would things be today if his voice was there? Anyway, he knew about this stuff on the level that it's common sense. You know, on the level that it's what a nourishing family does. It's, yeah. Just the same as in life forces. You know, a really great politician is never going to lose touch with, you know, we usually call it humanity, right? Never lose touch with, okay, I got to relate to people. I got to relate to people as people, not as this, you know, I'm the great Barack Obama, and he can come across as, no, I'm also this guy who'll listen to you. And, you know, Dr. King even more so, just proved that over and over again. Shelley, do you, yeah, sorry, Stacy. Got it?
Yay, got it. Sorry about that. I had to leave the meeting and restart my phone, but it's working now. I was just going to say that weed does change your brain. David was right. It makes you paranoid. I mean, that's a common side effect, that you get paranoid while you're high and that it can last. And my brother described LSD as me, only more intense, because I hear colors. I cross-sense like Margaret Mead. I can hear colors. Yellow has a certain sound, blue has a certain sound. Just the primary ones, red, yellow, and blue. They have sounds to me. When I see them, I hear like a musical note. And I also hear the voice of God. I'm a mystic. Since I was 3, I slammed my hand in a door. My dad said, God's punishing you. And God said, I don't punish children. I don't punish anyone. Run your hand under some water, sweetie. Your dad's being a jerk. I think he used a stronger word than jerk, but I don't want to use the stronger word because we're being recorded.
Okay.
And I ran my hand under cold water and it felt better. But my persona, I perceive myself as a mystic, and you know, some people perceive me as a schizophrenic because I hear voices. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. And when I'm manic, I'm bipolar. When I'm manic, I am a bulldozer, and I know it. I know I'm talking at people, so I try to be more quiet when I'm manic because I know I want to be a chatterbox and just go zoom. You know, my friend wrote an essay trying to on my behalf and said, Stacy plows through obstacles. Like, no, I don't want you to say that. It's true, but maybe we could say it differently. And so that was my persona, and yet I think of myself as quiet and shy. I don't think of myself as a bulldozer usually, except when I'm manic. And it's just the persona gap, you know, what my sponsor sees and what I see, and then doing 10 steps. I look at my actions, not my intentions, not my feelings, my actions. What did I actually do today? And what did I try to hide a good motive under a bad motive? And it really helps with the persona gap, I think, because it helps us look at ourselves, you know, with the self-reflection and the meditation and the prayer.
Thanks.
That's all.
Yeah, Cynthia.
Sorry, before there was some stuff going on outside, and it was hard to concentrate. I have to admit right now, I'm having quite a bit of a pendulum swinging right now. But I think one of the things in terms of persona gap that's a real challenge for me is that there's a lot of memory links, because I did experience a lot of verbal abuse, not at home, and also because my and this I can say, it's pretty. My mom's gay too, and we were living and so I was generally hated by everybody around me. So the minute I start saying, "Oh, somebody's going to tell me the persona gap," part of me is just, and it's a hard memory link to get through, and I understand it makes sense, but getting to that place of calm where people aren't going to just attack me, you know, is a real difficult thing for me to get past. So
Yeah, one of the things I don't quite say this enough, but I'm pleased we read the Credo. And I think, you know, we need to develop that and add to it a bit in time. But, you know, these are tools. Okay, and as I said on Wednesday, there are sometimes passive listening is a very bad idea. You don't teach it to someone. You don't expect someone to do it, and there's something similarly true about the persona gap. These are very sort of sharp tools in a way. And moment. So it's like, okay, if I'm really, really vulnerable, what do I want? Okay, well, you know, I want to be looked after. I want someone who's, to use, you know, the technical terms here, I want someone who's really coming from their caring life force. I don't want someone who's putting on me their clever therapeutic methods. I just want someone who's there for me. Like, you know, it's a little funny for me to go back to that time, but, you know, it's like, you know, when a 14-year-old girl has been dumped by her first boyfriend, you know, she doesn't want to be taught a lesson. You know, she doesn't want to be taught a lesson about, you know, how you pick the right boyfriend and blah, you know, and she doesn't want to be passive listened to, let alone passive listening. You know, she just wants comfort from someone she trusts. And if that's a mum, that's great. You know, if it's not a mum, because not all families are nourishing families, but, you know, it's a best friend. That's it. So, you know, I mean, methodologically, I think I need to say more often, some of the tools are really sharp, and you're careful when you use them. Okay. Yeah, Mary.
Well, you know, I really feel for you, Cynthia, and it's interesting because quite early on, something's popped into my head really strongly, and I didn't want to interrupt Peter. And what it was, I started thinking about how when I was trying to cope with my husband's verbal abuse, this is before I went into Al-Anon, I didn't fight back because I knew that wasn't going to be helpful. So I just took it, and it's like a dark kind of passive listening because you're trapped. And it's not what the tool passive listening is about, but it can kind of feel like it. So what I wanted to bring up into the forum is passive listening is a tool you use when you're safe, when you choose. You have complete control. Well, maybe you don't if the group leader's saying, okay, it's time for passive listening up, but in a sense you do, because you're in a safe environment that you've elected to be in. But that passivity that comes when you just, the only way to survive is to, leave the room if you're old enough to leave the room and you can do it safely, or just bear it. That's not what passive listening is about, because it's all about safety, right, Peter?
Well, yeah, and in terms of the levels of listening, just take a situation like you said, or let me move and use another example, which I can do. I can, I can have a hard time, used to have a hard time in some staff meetings, because I get into fights, okay? There can be a time that passive listening might be useful there, but it might not be. And what you can do, and I guess we've got it with, there's one concept I've not covered, so I will cover that on Wednesday. It's called feelings of accomplishment, or we call it FOA. And in a way, if things are rough, go for the pendulum, go for FOAs. That, and a little bit, they're a sort of survival kit, okay? They'll get you through the tough times. If you think of the more chancy, let me use that word for a moment, the more chancy tools like passive listening and the persona gap, leave them for a while, just, go for the survival kit. It'll work.
Well, again, it's just completely overwhelming to me to hear these concepts. Bearing in mind that for 50 years, all I had was my memories, and 40 years was my essay, and I didn't have any other Pellin material, right? Because I didn't connect with the Pellin Institute, didn't know about it, and nobody was interested, right? And so to hear Peter's, evolution and development, and that connection with David is incredible for me. So it's really interesting to me to hear, you talked about the sharp edge tools and the question is, when to use them. And I connect that with this a term that was used in one of our previous sessions, effectiveness, right? Because one of the things that can happen, you correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, but I think that's one of the things you've been saying, is that people get these degrees and this training, and they use the tools, not necessarily with the right awareness of the person, but they use the tools because that's me, and I've been trained to use the tools. So they use the tools, and they might not be helping somebody, right? And then the people defer because they've got degrees and letters and everything else. But David had this awareness, right? And he talked about objective awareness. So the subjective awareness would say, well, I'm using the tools, I've got the degrees, and even though I'm being nice, you'll listen to me. But that might not be what the person needs. But the objective awareness, I'm believing, brings about the effectiveness. Now, a very quick story, and Peter might remember this. I didn't experience this directly, but I believe I got it from Lee Danvers, the minister who was a ring holder, who brought me in. My memory because we're going back 50 years now, is I'm not quite sure whether I experienced this directly or whether I heard it from Lee or it's a mixture, but I heard it very close range. And Peter might remember this, but this is what happened in the unit, is that a man came into the activator unit one day asking for help. Came in off the street asking for help, and David refused to serve the man. And said, you know, and turned the guy out of the unit. This man came in looking for help, and David was roundly criticized by the ring holders at the time. What are you doing? This is what you're set up for. This is what you're supposed to do. And Pellin would have nothing to do with it. He wouldn't talk. He wouldn't allow this person to stay. Turn him out of the unit, and was roundly condemned by all the ring holders. And within 24 or 48 hours, this person was arrested by the police on some serious charge like either murder or child rape or something like that, right? And when it was told me, and I don't really think that I was there or saw any of this, but it's a little bit fuzzy. But when it was told me, you know, it was told me with the, and if you read my essay, it talks about Bob Hamilton, who eventually became a Greenpeace activist, who was a journalist at the time, who used the phrase that Pellin was the person who knew. He had X-ray vision when it came to human behavior. And so there was this dimension which I associate with David's teaching about awareness, and I'm trying to connect back to what Peter has said about these sharp-edged tools. When do you use them? When do you not use them? You know, Pellin wasn't going to use passive listening with that person. And so it was quite a remarkable story. I'll defer to Peter now and see if, Peter, you recall that or anything, because I believe I heard it at close range. I'm not sure 100% if I was there or not, but I thought that's an illustration perhaps to some
Yeah, I don't know why, but I didn't know much about that. I heard it, but peripherally. But, you know, because I guess there's a certain way what I've done with both, partly because the population I worked with and the population I've always been interested in working with, I sort of flattened out both David's work and Fritz Perl's work. As you know, some of you know, right from the beginning, I use the word ordinary as something that was positive. But David was very clear about situations like that. And if you might remember, you know, I know some of the work is dense, and I guess I'm putting a lot out in these sessions. But when I talked about callousing, that was a few weeks ago. And just to touch on that here, and I can expand on it next week, on Wednesday. You know, whenever we hurt someone, someone hurts us, or we hurt ourselves, or we're around a lot of hurt, David's concept is we callous to it. Like my hands are soft. If I go out and, if I've got a garden and go out and work in the garden all day, my hands will blister. They won't quite be able to take that hurt, so I'll develop dead skin. And that enables me to do the gardening. But the callousing happens. And in terms of that particular situation, you know, David said you can see it on people's faces. Callousing goes to their face, and you can read it. And if you're tuned to it, and this guy walked in, he's got all these calluses on his face. David knew who was in the unit, and he said, okay, I'm chucking this guy out. Yeah. And, you know, in another way, it's common sense. In another way, it's what a nourishing family would do. Oh, you are going to go out with him, and the family's worried. You know, this guy looks like bad news. You know, and when they look into it as the situation you mentioned, yes, he's bad news. So we're going to make, you know, you're 16. you know, I'm your mom. This is what's going to happen. So, you know, there is a way that, you know, what we do is sort of codified common sense. And, you know, one of the reasons I want to push that point of view is, you know, my, to be quite frank, dedication. It's not happening right now for other reasons, but training foster carers. You know, they do fantastic work. The good ones do fantastic work. That's a bit of a, I tend to put long answers into simple questions, sorry. But yeah, but that absolutely fitted him. And I guess I did hear about it, but somehow or other, the particular part of the material that's called callousy, David really taught me and my boss, okay? And so I guess we were very attuned to that. So it was like, yeah, know where it's coming from. And of course that was the, which is now called, I've got to get the initials, bear with me. JH, yeah, I got it. Very modern for me. It's called JHBC, John Howard Society of British Columbia. And that's where I worked at that time. That's how I met David. That's also how I met Fritz Perls. The guy who was then the director of that, his name was Merv Davis, is in the film. And somehow David taught Merv and I and a colleague called John Webster the callousing stuff in particular. Maybe because we're working, you know, in prisons and parole officers, we're parole officers. So somehow when that thing came out, I just knew where it's coming from. So I was not part of the opposition. And there's no question in my mind where he was coming from. You know, that person is not going to be around these kids. Yeah. Mary, how's Stapleton? How's this for you?
I was thinking about some feedback that you gave me, Peter. When I started your course, getting feedback was something that I was really looking forward to, because I was very confused about myself and my relationships with men. But I was also terrified, because I had this thing that I was really mean and selfish. This is what I had been told over and over again, thoughtless, mean and selfish. And at the end of the 2 weeks in Italy, you gave me some feedback about how something worked that I'd just done, and you said that you saw me turn on the tap and allow all my power and authority to pour away, and the pathetic side of me to come forward. And I felt such a sense of relief. To be called pathetic was so much easier to understand and to deal with than the fear that I'd had of, you know, being described as selfish and mean. So getting that feedback has stuck with me. I know how I turn that tap on and allow all my strengths to pour away. And I learned to be a bit more selfish in protecting myself. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shelley, yeah, Shelley.
Hi.
Yeah.
I I guess I'm thinking of how I have a hard time passive listening when I get feedback, right, about the gap. So I think I'm getting better. You know, it's a very important thing to do in my field of work, right, is to be able to listen to my clients' feedback, and I ask them for it. And sometimes I forget, but you know, you tell them, please let me know if you're upset, if you're mad, please. That's an important part, is our relationship. But I think people don't feel safe. But I do remember having gaps, like whatever I was doing, right? Like I worked first as a school counselor. I worked with elementary school kids and then middle school kids. So I love children. So I probably have a certain demeanor, you know, that comes across the way I talk to them. And then I worked, I'll just not go through my whole resume, but then I worked for Department of Children and Family Services. And you have to be a bit calloused to be a good social worker. I hated doing it. It didn't last very long. But it's a very hard job. And then I was an intern at a private practice. And so a nice person who was not the boss, so to speak, but kind of under, tried to give me feedback about how I was too rough, you know, working in private practice. And she was right? But that was weird. And then I started my own private practice and had a mom of a much older teen tell me in the waiting room, you know, you talk like you're talking to a child, right? So I had to keep taking these and going, inside. So outwardly, I try to act smooth, but inwardly, I'm not passive listening, right? I'm going, oh no, oh yeah, what's going on? Am I doing that? I didn't know I was doing that. So to keep like trying to balance that, right? How do I balance my own reception of the information, right? I can try to passive listen. I'd like to think I'm better at it now. I had to practice for 22 years, but who knows, right? What the feedback could be.
Well, that's a good one. That can be a good one to explore. And in our field of work, you're right. And it's interesting you said that, because about calluses and being a social worker. Because, I mean, you know, there were hardly any professionals who recognized David, but my boss and I did. And he very much taught us about callousing. You know, this is what happens to you if you're going in and out of prisons. Okay. Yeah, Cynthia.
Just another. On the subject of callousing and what's going on in the United States and stuff, and I'm finding I'm not responding with fear, but it's making me very, very sad. And I think it's making me sad because I'm thinking about the amount of callousing that has to happen for all of this to be going on is just, and the amount of hurt there has to be. I don't even, I mean, I don't even know how to comprehend it, you know?
Yeah, just to say something about that. When I was training in Gestalt, which is, you know, one of the big arms of our work, and that was in the days of, you know, that again was in the sort of mid to late 60s, where there were lots of risk taking and all of that. And it was sort of understood that, you know, the highest level of with people getting in touch with their anger and their rage, okay? And that was sort of accepted, and it was the path you had to go, okay? And the bit I turned that around, and partly it was, well, I'll say the story quickly. I don't remember the man's name. Kalamazoo College in Michigan. And this guy, and he came up to me, he was an assistant professor of English, and he'd come to a workshop. And I was doing, you know, we're doing all this anger, rage stuff, and I was also doing some art therapy and, you know, good stuff. And he came up to me and said, "Can I talk to you a minute?" I said, "Sure." He said, "I'm very angry. I'm Jewish. You know, I'm a Holocaust survivor. I think his parents or grandparents were Holocaust survivors, parents. I don't do that with my anger. I do something else. I write plays. And, you know, it was like a light bulb going off for me. I thought, wow, you know, and it changed it for me. Yes, there's a place to get in touch with our anger and rage. And the thing I've learned over time, to me, sadness, and you use the word sadness, can be, I'm not saying anger and rage doesn't need to happen, particularly today I'm not saying that. But there's something about sadness in my experience, because I studied it a lot after that, is almost more fundamental in achieving change than anger is. It was sort of interesting. So, yeah. Elizabeth Hurwitz. Hi.
You're not unmuted, Elizabeth, so we can't hear you.
Unmute. Here we go.
There we go.
All right. Are we good now?
Yes.
I'm such a tech. I do have some tech for you, though. Later, Mary, I'll email you. I agree with you that anger is a limiting emotion. It doesn't usually translate very well. It doesn't accomplish its aims. But if you can feel the sadness under the anger, that's incredibly powerful, because then you actually do take action. And it doesn't dictate what kind of action you take. It mobilizes you. You feel like, I'm not going to put up with that. You know, it's like, I'm not putting up with that shit in my life, you know? I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in the States, and I've been involved in civil rights law since 1976, actually, when I started law school. I also make documentaries, and I made one documentary 2 years ago about the murder of Michael Brown and Ferguson. And I am acutely aware of white privilege in this country. And, you know, I could do a rant. I mean, Peter knows I got a short fuse, you know, so, but you can do a rant, but it leaves you depleted completely. So touching on the sadness actually is like the long-term elixir, you know, that can just keep you going. You know, after a friend gets killed, after somebody else is injured, after a family is devastated, you can go, okay, you know what? I want to try to heal that situation. And everybody's got a different way of handling that, right? I could not be a therapist. Okay, just putting that right out there. No, I have insufficient patience, really, to be able to do the work you guys do. But yeah, that's what I had to share.
I also think sadness, you know, coming in on that sort of deep level, which is relevant to the levels of listening. They're the first four, certainly the first three. The take in what it's about. And in my view, that, you know, there's no doubt. You know, Dr. King did that. You know, how do you know, I will not teach you how to hate them. I'm saying you have to love them. After Alabama, for girls, you know, somehow or other, some sort of genius, he could combine both. He could combine, I think, the anger and the sadness, and then plummet to some, I mean, in a positive way, you know, and then go down some sort of depth into himself. And, you know, as we now know, he wasn't a saint by any means. You know, and if you read some of the sermons, he's saying he wasn't a saint. But you know, when that happened, and I think he went to a depth inside himself so much that it communicated. It just communicated. You know, sort of that. It's a part of our whole methodology that is different is not seeing prominent people through the eyes of, say, a theory, but is turning it around, and the prominent people and the people who achieve so much can provide support to some of our parts of our theory. Because I think people like Freud and Erik Erikson, you know, for all their power, you know, to reduce Leonardo da Vinci or, you know, Gandhi to some sort of psychological theory. You know, no, guys, we're not going to go there. You know, we need to be a little more modest than that. We need to realize that, you know, our field of endeavor and learning is adolescent and, you know, been around 150 years or something. We need to be in awe of the great ones, not reduce them to our psychology. But looking at it another way, they can be examples that sort of prove this, or illustrate the sort of things we're doing. Elizabeth.
See, I'm on.
Elizabeth, you were unmuted and now you've muted yourself.
Am I good now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay. You know, I think one of the gifts of really talented politicians is to know they take that sadness that a lot of them are very much in touch with, and they ask a very important question. They ask, how can I best communicate for people to hear me and effectuate change through putting forth a message that can be absorbed? I mean, I have, you know, I'm thinking of a Detroit City Councilman who years and years ago, really, really brilliant Black lawyer. And he did that. He was an amazingly angry guy. But when he spoke with people, he spoke from the position of, my anger has made me really sad that the Black community is being devastated. How can I communicate that to a white audience? And it was from, you know, it's from a position of, how can I be of service? But you don't get to, how can I be of service if you're pissed off all the time? You just don't get there. It doesn't happen. At least I've never seen it happen.
Okay. Victor.
Just very quickly again, both what Elizabeth said and what Peter just said. And you talked, Peter, about, you know, some Dr. King going into a deep place. And in my experience with David Pelham, especially as I went through, you know, 2 rounds of the lectures, and I came into the unit as a really, really messed up young male, 22, whatever I was, and then got to the end of 2 lectures, or whenever that last lecture, when David, you know, held out his arm and showed these 2 scars and said, you see, I was a fool once too. And that moment when, and again, I'm still learning it, and you've just touched on it, Peter. I mean, here's a man who went into a very, very deep place within himself. And we're talking about getting to the hurt. That if I understand everything that's been being said is all, and this is to do with the persona as well, we all conceal our hurt from other people, and yet other people can see it. And that's what you've been saying about the self-identity. And yet Pelham went, you know, he obviously went into the darkness. If I could use that expression without being mystical, he went into the darkness. He wrestled with his own demons. He obviously came face to face with the devastating hurt in his life. And out of that, he grew something. And it wasn't just it was tools, but which maybe he got from other people, but it was also this awareness. And as Elizabeth said about that Black person being able to speak, I'm, you know, paraphrasing what Elizabeth said, with power, with conviction. And that's the way David Pelham was. It was amazing to me, and I'm still looking back on it, that here's a man who could get in your face and challenge you and finger in the air and everything else, and yet somehow, without him toning down his voice saying, I really care about you, somehow at a deeper level, you felt that there was something there that he cared about you at a level that you could hardly articulate. And I believe that's what Peter was alluding to. And David Pellin had that. I mean, I know that he had that. And, you know, he passed that, it touched me with it. And it made a big difference in my life. And again, it's really special to hear all of you people talking about this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we need to finish there. I guess I would like to finish just in terms of levels of listening and persona gap, and to, I guess, leave us with a theme of sadness. Because on Wednesday, I'm going to look at hard feedback and passive listening. So I'm staying a bit tightly on these themes for now. But I think there is something about, as well as, you know, we need to take action, we need to be angry, we need all that. But, you know, underneath that, we need to tap into each other through sadness as well. Yeah. And we'll finish with the usual round, as we call them. I'm Peter, and I'm in Norfolk, and yeah, thanks for today. Elizabeth Lewitz?
I'm Elizabeth. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, USA, and I listened a lot today. It was very, very helpful.
Okay. Stacy?
I'm Stacy. I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'll have to listen to the tape on the 4 levels of listening again, because I've really got the persona gap, but the 4 levels of listening I'm not too clear on yet.
Okay. That's demanding stuff. We'll be going over it. Vic?
I'm Vic Flagg in Abbotsford, British Columbia, or out of Vancouver. Again, deeply touched by everything that's said, and I thank all of you for your sharing. And I haven't yet been doing the kind of preps for these sessions, reading the homework. I just started to a little bit tonight. I've been overwhelmed by some things going on, so I'm hoping to go over the material a bit more before I come to these sessions, and I'm looking forward to being here again, and I'm very grateful for all of you, and especially for Peter for carrying on the memory of David Pellin.
Mary Stapleton?
I'm Mary on the south coast of England. Thank you very much. I find it very relaxing, Peter, listening to your voice.
Oh, thank you. Cynthia?
Cynthia, Kankakee, Illinois. And I'm glad to be here. This was very helpful, and has also have given me a lot to think about. Thank you.
Okay, Mary? South of the border?
So I'm Mary Gilliman in Rosarito Beach, Mexico. And just a little housekeeping bit, both Elizabeth, Victoria was going to a birthday party, Elizabeth had to go to the next thing. They said in the chat, but you know, other people might not have noticed. I just wanted to say about Vic saying homework, that I put the resources there to make it easy for people to double check with things. There isn't an implication of homework. There might be, I mean, there will be when we do a proper training course that's a paid course, which we're in the early stages of planning and deciding to do. But this is really, it's completely optional. It's just saying, if you want, it's the repetition thing. It's saying, if you want to know these tools deeply, here's where you can go and find them. Just making it easy for people who want to follow up. And it's completely optional and open. And I appreciate you thinking of it like that, Vic, because that's a great sign of, you know, commitment. But I just wanted to make it clear for other people there isn't an expectation about that. It's just an offering. housework things aside, do I want to say anything? Well, you know, I spent most of my 40 years really wanting to know about the connections between the tools. So this part of the series is very exciting to me. I feel I understand the tools much more deeply after my recent re-immersion, when I was able to get more involved when I became a widow. But for many years, I felt very frustrated because I loved the tools, but I knew them only at a basic level. And I really feel enriched by having the, you know, I don't know what it is. I just love them so much. I never mind if I'm hearing the same words that I've heard lots of times before. They're just so amazing. And this isn't strictly on the topic, but what attracted me right in the beginning was that the world of work was included, and that every tool seems to apply to anybody, whatever their life situation. That is so different from all the many wonderful and rich schools of psychotherapy. They are about the field of psychotherapy and helping people. You can't see them reflected in the full world of every field of human endeavor. So I think contribution training and penning tools are really special, and stick with a little bit of the truth, but that little bit of the truth has a perspective that is really rare in the particular field of psychotherapy and counseling. That's
Okay.
I didn't know I was going to say that, but it's from the heart.
Okay. Well, I'll see you on Wednesday. And thanks so much for coming.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.